Welcome. I'm Raul Lowry Contreras, and this is the Contreras Report American Political Edition. As you know, in the past few days, we're now in the middle of May, and we have had some tremendous political events occur, mainly caused by reaction from former President Donald J. Trump to the chairperson of the Republican Conference, Lynn Cheney, Congresswoman from the state of Wyoming. She voted to impeach Donald Trump in the second impeachment after the January 6th episode, and she not only voted to impeach him, but she actually publicly stated her reasons why. One of them was that President Donald J. Trump, now former president, was lying to the American people, to the Republican Party, and to anyone that would listen to him, that he won the election. He did not win the election, Lynn Cheney said. He did not win the election. He is not accepting the judgment by vote of the American people. He is the first president in U.S. history, according to Lynn Cheney, to do so. Well, that has caused a huge eruption of support for Trump in the Congress of the United States, in the House of Representatives, not the U.S. Senate. You had 140 some odd Republican congressmen vote to not accept the Electoral College vote, and you had those same people that voted individually, like states like Pennsylvania and other states that Wisconsin, Michigan, that were close and that had gone for Trump in 2016, that flipped and went for Biden this time. So Lynn Cheney stood up and said, no mas, as we say in Spanish, no mas. You cannot continue lying about such a basic American institution as the presidency and who won the election for it. Well, Trump called for her expulsion. Republican congressman called to expel her or to kick her out of her job as chairwoman of the Republican Conference. She was the highest ranked Republican woman in the House of Representatives. In fact, in the whole Congress of the United States, she was number 3. After Kevin McCarthy, number 1, as Congressman Scalise from Louisiana, number 2. Then came Lynn Cheney. But the rebellion occurred. Kevin McCarthy joined it, considering that Kevin McCarthy said in a speech in the House that Donald J. Trump was responsible for the riot of January 6th, or the insurrection, the rebellion, whatever you want to call it. The attack and the invasion, the attack on and the invasion of the United States Congress. Kevin McCarthy said that Trump was responsible. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, he changed his mind. He was now kissing up to President Trump because Kevin McCarthy thinks that the Republicans will win the House of Representatives back in 2022, in November 2022. That's very, very possible, because Nancy Pelosi only has a 5-vote margin in the House when all the seats are filled. So the chances of McCarthy becoming Speaker of the House are pretty good. And so that's all he cares about. He doesn't care that he crapped all over the highest ranking Republican woman in the House, a name who's legendary. It's a legendary name in the Republican Party. Her father, Dick Cheney, was a Secretary of Defense in the most successful war America has ever fought in a short period of time, the first Gulf War. We nailed Iraq within days, 100 hours. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney ran that war for President Bush, George H.W. Cheney was a congressman from Wyoming, became Secretary of Defense, and of course was elected Vice President of the United States in the year 2000 with President George W. Bush, I'm sorry. All right, so let's talk about what happened there. Within the past 24 hours, the Republican conference, by voice vote, kicked Lynn Cheney out of her job as chairman of the Republican conference. So let's title this little essay that I'm going to present you with, "The Largest Ballistic Missile Attack Against Americans Ever," quote unquote. When Iranian missiles were used by Iranian-sponsored militias in Iraq to attack a U.S. military base in 2020, and initial reports were that a handful of American soldiers were slightly injured and no one was killed, the United States Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump, told us that only minor headaches, quote unquote, were suffered by a handful of soldiers. This from a president who told the world he knew, quote, more about ISIS terrorists than his generals, unquote. This from a man who never served in the U.S. military at any level, yet tells people he knows more about the military than real soldiers because he went to a kindergarten through 12th grade school that was in fact a military school run by a retired Army colonel for sometime delinquents like Donald J. Trump, who were invited to leave public schools because they were punks and bullies. Commander-in-Chief Donald J. Trump lied to us about the seriousness of the missile bombardment. From various sources, including 60 Minutes, we now know that 100 soldiers, 10% of those present, were injured. 1,000 soldiers were evacuated before the bombardment, when we knew from intelligence that the missiles were going to be fired. 10% of those present, 1,000, were injured, some seriously, by the bombardment. Fortunately, only a civilian contractor died. No soldier has yet died, but many of the hundreds suffered extensive head and brain trauma. As my 3 Marine Corps drill instructors from boot camp would have said 61 years ago when I was there, quote, attack those Iranian whores and mow them down like wheat in a hailstorm, unquote. These men knew from their experiences, one in World War II and the other 2 in Korea at the Chosin Reservoir, they knew that no one could be permitted to attack U.S. forces and get away with it. I agree. Commander-in-Chief Donald J. Trump not only lied to us about the attack, he compounded his lie by not answering the attack with even a minimal show of strength and resolve. In not responding, Commander-in-Chief Donald J. Trump became the first president in U.S. history, in American history, to not respond to American forces being missile attacked in force by an enemy. He is the first. We must keep in mind that Trump claims American military from generals on down are losers, quote unquote. Today, however, former, quote, Commander-in-Chief, unquote, Trump has stepped out to attack and challenge Congressman Lynn Cheney, Republican of Wyoming. He calls her a warmonger and attacks her because she voted to impeach him when he was charged with provoking the attack by his supporters on Congress on January 6th. He adds attacks on her because she clearly states his, quote, big lie is a lie about his re-election being torpedoed by a gigantic, quote, rigging, unquote. As it happens, Lynn Cheney is the highest-ranking Republican woman in the House of Representatives. That, apparently, is the key to attacks on her by Trump. Trump lost millions of suburban Republican women in his loss to Joe Biden. Because they swamped Trump, he has become, or perhaps he has always been, a misogynist. Trying to bully Lynn Cheney, however, is a losing proposition. As Frank Sinatra would probably say in his heyday, Lynn Cheney is one tough broad, quote unquote. Certainly she's tougher than Trump. He may be successful in having her dumped from GOP leadership by his sycophants in the House of Representatives, but if he does, she'll run for president in 2024, in the 2024 primaries, and she will scald poor little Donald by humiliating him, by showing him to be a bully who cannot handle one, quote, tough broad, unquote. My guess is he might beat her in votes, but only after he has lost his manhood to her deep-seated, profound attacks that will turn off even more women from voting for him than did in 2020, when he was wiped out in a landslide 306 electoral vote catastrophe that retired the twice impeached Trump. Women dumped him. I repeat, women dumped Trump. In every state that he lost, that he won in 2016, women dumped him. He carried Georgia by 11,000 votes. Georgia? Lynn Cheney might never become president, but when she is done with Trump, he will disappear for good. He will disappear after suffering a political death by 1,000 cuts from a very angry and a very smart woman, Congresswoman Lynn Cheney, Republican of Wyoming. I'm Raul Lowry Contreras, and it is my extreme pleasure to host you on the Contreras Report, either the political report, the American political report, or the international edition, or the Mexico edition. If you want to be notified when we post a new post of one of the three editions, or all three at the same time, and you want to be notified, subscribe either on YouTube or Facebook, and you will be notified. That way you can stay current. This is now the middle of May. We're entering summer without masks, we hope, and being able to mix and socialize as we have normally for hundreds of years. And I look forward to returning to some normalcy. Part of that normalcy will be jumping all over bad Republicans who are out to destroy the Republican Party and to help Republicans like Lynn Cheney who are trying to save them. Again, I'm Raul Lowry Contreras. This is the Contreras Report, Political Report edition, and we look forward to being with you again soon. Thank you for being there.